Captain Sarah Mitchell had survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, countless firefights, and an IED explosion that took her left leg below the knee, but nothing had prepared her for the challenge of walking into Harrison Heights High School on a cold September morning. At 32, with sharp green eyes that had seen too much and dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, she looked younger than she felt. The prosthetic leg hidden beneath her dress pants and boots gave her a slight limp, barely noticeable unless someone was looking for it. Most people weren't. Most people saw what they wanted to see, a young woman, probably fresh out of college, certainly too inexperienced to handle a school like this. Principal Margaret Dawson had been honest during the interview. "We've had 4 history teachers this year," she'd said, her kind eyes filled with concern. "None lasted more than 6 weeks. There's a group of senior boys who've made it their mission to drive out anyone who tries to discipline them. The leader is Chase Holloway, intelligent, charismatic, and completely aware of the power he holds over this school. His father is on the school board, his family has money, and he's untouchable. But Sarah, I read your application. If anyone can handle them, it's you." Sarah had simply nodded. She'd led Marines through Kandahar province. She could handle some privileged teenagers. Now, standing outside room 204 with a box of teaching materials in her arms, Sarah took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The classroom was standard, desks in neat rows, a whiteboard at the front, faded posters of Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. on the walls. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. She set down her box and began unpacking: textbooks, her laptop, a small American flag she'd carried through both deployments. She was arranging papers on her desk when she heard the door swing open behind her. Well. You're the new teacher." The voice was male, smooth, laced with amusement. Sarah turned to find herself face to face with Chase Holloway, and she understood immediately why he ruled this school. He was devastatingly handsome in that effortless way that 18-year-old boys sometimes are, tousled brown hair that looked artfully messy, striking blue eyes that assessed her with intelligence and mockery in equal measure, and an athletic build that filled out his maroon and white varsity jacket perfectly. The letter H emblazoned on the chest seemed almost redundant. Everything about him screamed confidence, privilege, and power. He leaned against a desk with casual arrogance, a slight smirk playing at his lips. "Ms. Mitchell," Sarah replied, not bothering to look up from her unpacking. "And yes." "Huh." Chase moved closer, his footsteps deliberate. "You look young. What are you, like, 25? Behind him, 2 more boys entered, Tyler and Jason, both wearing matching varsity jackets, clearly his crew. They flanked him like lieutenants, smirking at their leader's performance. "Old enough to know when a student is testing me," Sarah said calmly, finally meeting his gaze. "And experienced enough to not be impressed by it." Tyler laughed. "Dude, she's got attitude. I like it." "Ms. Mitchell," Chase said, drawing out her name mockingly. "Do you know how many teachers we've had this year?" 4. None of them made it past Halloween. Think you'll break the record?" Sarah set down the book she'd been holding and walked toward them, her expression unreadable. Up close, she could see the calculation in Chase's eyes, the way he was used to adults either cowering before him or trying too hard to be his friend. She'd seen the same look in young Marines who thought their rank gave them permission to be cocky. "I think," she said quietly, "that you should worry less about me and more about whether you're going to pass your finals. Now take your seats. Class starts in 3 minutes." For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Chase held her gaze, clearly unused to being dismissed so easily. Then, with exaggerated slowness, he strolled to the back of the classroom and dropped into a desk, his friends following suit. Other students began filtering in, and Sarah noticed how they reacted to Chase, some gravitating toward him like moths to a flame, others giving him a wide berth. He was the sun around which this classroom orbited, and he knew it. The bell rang. Sarah turned to the whiteboard and wrote her name in clear, bold letters. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Ms. Mitchell, and this is U.S. history. Before we begin, let's establish some ground rules. I don't tolerate disrespect. I don't accept excuses. And I don't give up easily. You work hard, I work hard. Clear?" She turned to face the class. Most students nodded. Chase stared at her with open curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he hadn't quite figured out yet. The first week was a test, not of the students, but of Sarah. Chase and Hi's friends launched a careful campaign of disruption. Chase's phone would ring during lectures, playing increasingly ridiculous ringtones. When Sarah confiscated it, he'd pull out a second phone, then a third. Papers would go missing from her desk. Her carefully arranged seating chart would be scrambled overnight. Whoopee cushions appeared on her chair. Students would whisper and laugh at inside jokes whenever she turned to the board. Through it all, Sarah remained calm, methodical, refusing to rise to the bait. She confiscated phones without comment. She rearranged seating charts. She threw away the whoopee cushions. She taught with the same focused intensity she'd brought to leading Marines, as if the harassment didn't exist. But Chase was escalating. He could sense that his usual tactics weren't working, and it frustrated him. 2 weeks into the semester, Sarah arrived at her classroom to find cruel graffiti spray-painted across her door in garish red letters. P.G. Leg Mitchell, with a crude drawing of a pirate. Students in the hallway stopped and stared. Some gasped. Others tried to hide their laughter. Sarah stood frozen for just a moment, her hand tightening on her bag strap, jaw clenching. Someone had discovered her secret, the prosthetic leg she worked so hard to hide. Someone had weaponized her greatest vulnerability. She knew without proof that it was Chase. Who else would dare? Principal Dawson called her to the office immediately, full of apologies and promises to review security footage. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. This crosses every line. If you can identify who did this, we'll expel them immediately." But Sarah shook her head. "I know who did it. But I'm not running to you every time these boys act out. I'll handle it my way." "What does that mean?" Principal Dawson asked, concerned. "It means," Sarah said quietly, "that I'm going to teach them a lesson they won't forget." Act 2, The Revelation. The classroom was tense the next morning. Students whispered nervously, wondering if Ms. Mitchell would even show up after the graffiti incident. But Sarah arrived exactly on time, walking through the door with her head high and her expression calm. She'd spent the night wrestling with anger, humiliation, and the old familiar feeling of helplessness that had haunted her since the explosion. But she'd also made a decision. These kids needed to understand something bigger than their small, cruel world. Chase sat in his usual spot in the back row, arms crossed, watching her with a mixture of defiance and curiosity. He'd crossed a line, and he knew it. Part of him expected her to quit, like the others. Another part wondered what she'd do. "Today," Sarah began, standing at the front of the classroom, "we're discussing the Battle of Gettysburg. July 1863. Over 50,000 casualties in 3 days. It was the turning point of the Civil War, the moment when the tide shifted, when the Union forces proved they could stand and fight. And win against overwhelming odds." She wrote key dates on the board, her handwriting precise and controlled. "Boring," Chase announced loudly to his friends. "Who cares about dead people from like a million years ago? What does this have to do with real life?" Some students laughed nervously. Sarah set down her marker and turned to face him directly. "You're right, Mr. Holloway. Why should you care about people who died fighting for something they believed in? Why should you care about sacrifice, honor, or standing up for what's right when your life is so comfortable that the biggest challenge you face is coming up with new ways to torment your teachers?" The classroom went silent. Chase's smirk faltered slightly. I didn't mean. Those soldiers were younger than you, Sarah continued, her voice quiet but intense. 18, 17, some even younger. They left their homes, their families, knowing they might never come back. Many didn't. They died in fields and forests, far from home, for a cause they believed was worth dying for. So yes, Mr. Holloway, you should care. Because they gave everything so that spoiled kids like you could sit in air-conditioned classrooms and mock the very concept of sacrifice. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Jason looked at his desk. But Chase leaned forward, his expression hardening. Oh, here we go. The hero speech. Let me guess, you're going to tell us you were in the military or something? That we should respect you because you wore a uniform? Sarah's expression didn't change. I was. Marines. Captain. 2 tours in Afghanistan, Helmand and Kandahar provinces. I led a rifle platoon through some of the most dangerous territory in the country. The silence in the classroom was absolute. Even Chase looked momentarily surprised, though he tried to hide it. Tyler spoke up, his voice uncertain. You? No way. You're like. I mean, you're a woman. And women can't serve in combat? Sarah's voice was sharp. Tell that to the female Marines who died alongside their brothers. Tell that to the women who earned Silver Stars and Purple Hearts. Tell that to Sergeant Lee and Hester, who led her squad in a firefight in Iraq and earned the Silver Star for valor. Or maybe you think courage and sacrifice are only for men. Jason mumbled an apology. But Chase recovered his composure, leaning back in his chair with forced casualness. If you're such a badass soldier, why are you here teaching high school? Couldn't handle the real military anymore? For the first time, Sarah hesitated. The classroom held its breath. This was the moment, the choice between continuing to hide or finally being honest. She thought of the explosion, the blinding flash of light, the sensation of flying through the air, the moment she'd looked down and realized her leg was gone. She thought of the months of physical therapy, the depression, the nightmares, the feeling that she'd lost everything that defined her. And then she thought of Principal Dawson's words, find a new mission. You want to know why I'm here? Sarah's voice was quiet now, almost intimate. I got injured. July 22, 2019. My platoon was on patrol in Kandahar province. We were doing a routine check of a village, looking for IED manufacturing materials. I was walking point. She paused, her hand unconsciously moving to her left thigh. I missed something. Some sign that there was an explosive device buried in the road. It detonated right next to me. The classroom was so silent that students could hear their own heartbeats. Chase's face had gone pale. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Germany, Sarah continued. The doctors told me I was lucky. The explosion had taken my left leg below the knee, but I'd survived. 2 of my Marines had also been injured. I was supposed to feel grateful. Her voice cracked slightly. I felt like I'd failed. Like I'd lost everything that mattered. Ms. Mitchell, a girl in the front row, started to say, tears in her eyes. But Sarah wasn't finished. She walked toward Chase's desk, and now her limp was obvious as students paid attention for the first time. She stopped directly in front of him. You asked if I'm a badass soldier. I don't know. But I know I lost my leg serving my country. I know I spent 8 months learning to walk again. And I know that when I woke up every morning in that hospital, I had a choice, give up or find a new mission. She looked down at Chase, who couldn't meet her eyes. So here I am. Teaching ungrateful kids like you about history, about sacrifice, about what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself. You want proof? Before anyone could react, Sarah reached down and rapped her knuckles against her left leg. The hollow sound of metal echoed through the silent classroom, a sound that made several students gasp, made Tyler swear under his breath, made a girl in the third row start crying. Titanium, Sarah said matter-of-factly. State of the art. Cost the VA about $40,000. Very expensive. Want to see it, Mr. Holloway? Want to make another joke about Pegleg Mitchell? Chase looked like he might be sick. His face had drained of all color, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. I didn't. I'm sorry. Sarah stepped back, her expression softening slightly. You're sorry. Good. That's a start. But sorry doesn't undo the graffiti. It doesn't undo weeks of harassment. It doesn't undo the fact that you've made my job, a job I took because I still want to serve, still want to make a difference, almost impossible. She turned to address the entire class. I came here to teach you about history. But I'm learning that you need to understand something more fundamental first: respect. Empathy. The recognition that every person you meet is fighting battles you can't see. She returned to the front of the classroom and picked up her marker. Now, does anyone else have questions about why we study history? Or can we continue with the lesson? No one spoke. For the first time all semester, the class was completely, utterly focused. Act 3, the transformation. The change wasn't immediate, but it was undeniable. After Sarah's revelation, something shifted in the atmosphere of room 204. Students arrived on time. They took notes. They asked thoughtful questions. And Chase Holloway, the school's untouchable alpha, became the quietest student in the class. He sat in the back row, no longer smirking or disrupting, just listening with an intensity that suggested he was processing something profound. For 3 days, he didn't speak to Sarah at all. He'd arrive, sit down, take notes, and leave as soon as the bell rang. But Sarah noticed him watching her, the way she moved around the classroom, the way she never complained about stairs or long hallways, the way she treated her prosthetic as simply part of her, neither hiding it nor making it her defining characteristic. She was just herself. Strong. Capable. Unbroken. On the 4th day, Chase stayed after class. The other students filed out, casting curious glances at their fallen king. When the room was empty, Chase approached Sarah's desk slowly, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Ms. Mitchell? His voice was quiet, uncertain. Sarah looked up from the papers she was grading. Mr. Holloway. I need to apologize. For everything. The pranks, the disruptions, the graffiti. All of it. It was wrong. I was wrong. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Sarah set down her pen and studied him for a long moment. This was important. How she handled this conversation could determine whether this was real growth or just a guilty student trying to avoid consequences. Why did you do it? She asked finally. Chase struggled to find words. I don't know. Because I could, I guess. Because it was funny. Because everyone expected me to. Because I'm Chase Holloway, and that's what I do. I make teachers quit. It's like my thing. He laughed bitterly. How messed up is that? Pretty messed up, Sarah agreed. But at least you recognize it. That's more self-awareness than most adults manage. She gestured to a nearby chair. Sit down, Chase. He sat, and suddenly he looked younger, less like the school's resident alpha and more like what he really was, a scared 18-year-old who'd just had his worldview shattered. Can I tell you something? Sarah asked. When Chase nodded, she continued. That explosion that took my leg? I was responsible for those Marines. I was their platoon commander. Every decision I made affected their lives. And I failed them. How? Chase looked confused. You got hurt too. You almost died. I missed the IED. A good officer wouldn't have missed it. There would have been signs, disturbed earth, unusual patterns in the dust, nervous behavior from locals. I was trained to spot those things. But I missed them. And 2 of my Marines paid the price, along with me. Sarah's voice was steady, but pain flickered in her eyes. Do you understand what I'm saying? That it wasn't your fault? Chase offered. No. That leadership means responsibility. When you're in charge, everything that happens under your command is your responsibility, good or bad. I could blame circumstances, I could blame the insurgents who planted the bomb, I could blame bad intel. But at the end of the day, I was the officer. It was my job to keep my Marines safe. And I failed. She leaned forward, capturing Chase's full attention. You're a leader too, Chase. You might not wear a uniform, but you lead this school. Students look up to you. They follow your example. When you bully teachers, other kids think it's okay to bully teachers. When you disrespect authority, other kids disrespect authority. You set the tone for this entire school, whether you want that responsibility or not. Chase looked stunned. I never thought about it that way. Start thinking about it, Sarah said firmly. You have power here. Real power. The question is, what kind of leader do you want to be? The kind who tears people down to feel strong? Or the kind who lifts people up because that's what real strength looks like? Chase sat in silence for a long moment, processing her words. Finally, he looked up, and there were tears in his eyes. I don't know how to be the second kind. I've been the first kind for so long, I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn, Sarah said simply. Start small. Stand up for someone being bullied instead of being the bully. Do your homework not because you have to, but because you owe it to yourself to try. Treat people with the respect you'd want if you were in their position. It's not complicated, Chase. It's just hard. Will you help me? The question was vulnerable, almost childlike. Sarah smiled. That's literally my job. So yes. I'll help you. The transformation of Chase Holloway became the talk of Harrison Heights High School. Within a week, the change was impossible to ignore. In Sarah's class, Chase participated actively, asking thoughtful questions about the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, and the ethical implications of American intervention overseas. He stayed after class to help Sarah set up historical displays, carrying boxes without being asked and actually listening when she explained her teaching philosophy. His friends Tyler and Jason, taking their cue from their leader, also cleaned up their act, mocking, more engagement, actual effort. But it went beyond the classroom. Sarah heard from other teachers that Chase had started intervening when younger students were bullied, using his social capital to shut down cruelty instead of encouraging it. He organized study groups for struggling students. He apologized to the teachers he'd tormented, genuine apologies that acknowledged the harm he'd caused. The change was so dramatic that Principal Dawson called Sarah to her office again, this time with tears of gratitude in her eyes. I don't know what you did, the principal said, but Chase Holloway has become a different person. His teachers are reporting that he's polite, engaged, helpful. His grades have improved. He's even started a school-wide initiative to raise money for wounded veterans. What did you say to him? Sarah shrugged modestly. I just helped him see things from a different perspective. Showed him that leadership can mean building people up instead of tearing them down. He did the hard work himself. Whatever you did, it worked. You accomplished in a month what we couldn't accomplish in 4 years. Principal Dawson smiled. You're exactly the teacher this school needed, Sarah. You stayed when you had every reason to quit. You fought when you had every reason to surrender. You're a warrior, in every sense of the word. The semester progressed, and Sarah found herself actually enjoying teaching. Students in all her classes became more engaged as word spread about the Marine teacher, who'd survived combat and didn't take any nonsense. Parents sent grateful emails. Other teachers sought her advice on classroom management. She'd found her new mission, her new way to serve. But it was her relationship with Chase that remained the most meaningful. They'd developed an unexpected mentorship, meeting after school to discuss not just history but life, purpose, and the weight of responsibility. Chase told her about the pressure he felt from his wealthy father, the expectation that he'd attend an Ivy League school and take over the family business, the sense that his entire life had been planned without his input. Sarah listened without judgment, sharing her own struggles with expectations and identity after losing her leg. "The Marines defined me for so long," she told him one afternoon as they arranged a World War II exhibit. "When I lost that, I felt like I lost myself. I had to learn that I'm more than my uniform, more than my physical abilities. I'm the sum of my choices, my values, my actions. That's what defines us, Chase. Not our circumstances, but how we respond to them." Chase absorbed this wisdom like a sponge, and Sarah watched him blossom into the kind of young man who could change the world, or at least his small corner of it. Act 4, The Lesson Learned. The Law. St. Week before winter break, Sarah organized a final project for her class. Students would research and present on a historical figure who inspired them. She expected the usual suspects: Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln, maybe some would choose sports figures or entrepreneurs. What she didn't expect was for Chase to present on her. When he stood at the front of the classroom on presentation day, he was visibly nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he held up his poster board. The room fell silent, even Tyler and Jason, who'd been whispering, stopped to pay attention. "My project is about a modern hero," Chase began, his voice stronger than Sarah expected. "Captain Sarah Mitchell. She's sitting right there, probably wondering what I'm doing, but I'm going to tell you her story anyway." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She hadn't known what his project would be about. Chase continued, outlining her military service in impressive detail. He'd clearly done extensive research. He described her deployments, her leadership roles, the commendations she'd received. Then he showed a printed photo of the aftermath of an IED explosion, not her specific one but similar enough to convey the horror of it. On July 22, 2019, Captain Mitchell was leading her platoon on patrol when an IED exploded. She lost her leg. 2 of her Marines were injured. She spent months in hospitals and rehabilitation centers, learning to walk again, learning to live with a prosthetic leg that cost $40,000 and would never fully replace what she lost. His voice cracked slightly. "But here's what makes her a hero: she didn't give up. She could have taken a medical discharge and spent the rest of her life angry about what she lost. Instead, she chose to keep serving. She became a teacher." He looked directly at Sarah now, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "She came to Harrison Heights knowing we'd been through 4 teachers already. She knew this was a tough school with tough kids. And from day one, I made her life hell. We mocked her. We played pranks. I painted cruel graffiti on her door making fun of her disability." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I was so awful to her. And she never quit. She never gave up on us. She never gave up on me." Several girls in the class were crying now. Even Tyler looked uncomfortable, remembering his own role in the harassment. "Ms. Mitchell taught me that leadership isn't about power or popularity," Chase said, his voice growing stronger again. "It's about responsibility. It's about lifting others up instead of putting them down. It's about recognizing that service takes many forms. Sometimes it's wearing a uniform and fighting overseas, and sometimes it's standing in front of a classroom full of ungrateful kids and teaching them about sacrifice even when they mock you for it." He paused, collecting himself. "She taught me that losing doesn't mean quitting. That disability doesn't mean inability. That the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall down, they're the ones who get back up, over and over again, no matter how hard the fall was. Chase's voice broke completely now, tears streaming down his face. Ms. Mitchell, I'm sorry it took me so long to see what everyone should have seen from day one. You're not just a teacher. You're a hero. You're one of the bravest people I've ever met. And I'm honored, so honored, to be your student. The class erupted in applause. Students stood, giving Sarah a standing ovation that went on for almost a full minute. Sarah tried to maintain her composure, but tears rolled down her cheeks. She stood, walked to Chase, and pulled him into a tight hug. What's that? The ability to grow. To recognize when you're wrong and change. Most people never learn that. She smiled. You're going to do amazing things. I know it. Epilogue, full circle. Spring semester brought new challenges and new rewards. Chase's charity drive for wounded veterans raised over $10,000, with students from every grade participating. He organized a school assembly where Sarah spoke about her service, bringing not just students but also local veterans who shared their own stories. The event was so successful that local news covered it, and Sarah found herself briefly famous in her community. But more important than the publicity was the change in school culture. Bullying incidents decreased dramatically. Teachers reported better classroom behavior. Students were more engaged, more respectful, more willing to try. And at the center of it all was Chase Holloway, using his influence for good instead of cruelty, building up instead of tearing down. On the last day of school, as seniors prepared for graduation, Chase lingered in Sarah's classroom one final time. The walls were covered with student projects, thank you notes, and that framed photo of her Marine platoon in a place of honor. I got my acceptance letter, he told her, grinning. Naval Academy. I report in June. Sarah hugged him tightly. I'm so proud of you. You're going to be incredible. Only because you showed me how. He handed her an envelope. Read this after I leave. Please. After Chase left, Sarah opened the letter with trembling hands. Dear Ms. Mitchell. When you first arrived, I saw you as just another teacher to break, another authority figure to defeat. I was angry, entitled, and lost. I used my popularity as a weapon because I didn't know how else to feel powerful. You showed me a different kind of power. The power to lift others up. The power to serve something bigger than myself. The power to be a leader instead of just being popular. You lost your leg serving our country, but you didn't lose your purpose. You found a new one. And in doing so, you helped me find mine. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for seeing past the jackass I was to the person I could become. Thank you for teaching me that strength isn't about never falling down, it's about getting back up, no matter how hard you fell. I'm going to make you proud. I promise. Semper Fidelis. Chase Holloway. Sarah held the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the explosion, the hospitals, the depression, the painful decision to find a new purpose. She thought about that first day when Chase had mocked her, when she'd almost given up and quit like the others. She thought about the moment she'd revealed her prosthetic leg, the risk she'd taken in being vulnerable. It had all been worth it. Every moment of pain, every struggle, every doubt, worth it for this. For Chase and all the students like him, who just needed someone to believe in them first. The next fall, Sarah stood at her classroom door on the first day of school, greeting students as they arrived. A nervous freshman approached tentatively. Are you Ms. Mitchell? The girl asked. I am. Welcome to Harrison Heights. My brother graduated last year. Chase Holloway? He told me I had to take your class. He said. The girl's voice dropped to an odd whisper. He said you changed his life. Sarah smiled, her eyes bright with emotion. Well, he changed mine too. What's your name? Emily. Emily Holloway. Welcome, Emily. Come on, I'll show you to my classroom. As they walked together through the hallways, Sarah's prosthetic leg no longer seemed like a source of shame or weakness. It was simply part of her story, part of what made her who she was, a warrior who'd found a new battlefield, a leader who'd discovered that the greatest victories aren't always won with weapons. She'd lost her leg in Afghanistan. But she'd found her purpose in a high school classroom, teaching one stubborn, beautiful, redeemable student at a time that everyone deserves a second chance, that leadership means service, and that the strongest warriors are the ones who keep fighting even after they fall. On her classroom wall, she pinned a new photo next to her Marine platoon, Chase in his pristine Naval Academy uniform, standing tall and proud, no longer the bully he'd been but the leader he'd become. 2 photos, 2 missions, same warrior. She turned to face her new class of students, ready for whatever challenges they'd bring. "Good morning, everyone," she said warmly. "Welcome to U.S. history. Before we begin, I want to tell you something important. Everyone has a story. Everyone has battles you can't see. And everyone deserves respect until they prove otherwise. Now, let's get started." And with that, Captain Sarah Mitchell, teacher, warrior, survivor, began her mission once again.